This morning, instead of a mission spotlight, we have live missionaries here this morning with us. We have Deborah and Mitch. Deborah is Paul and Olive's granddaughter. Is here visiting, and they recently went to Chad in Africa, and I think they're going someplace in the future. So if they'll come up, I'll give the time to them, and they will share about what they did and maybe about what they're going to be doing.
Bon sabbat. That's Happy Sabbath in French, which is the language of Chad, where we got back from being missionaries for about a month, just about a week ago. My name is Debbie. I'm Paul and Olive's granddaughter. This is my boyfriend, Mitch, and he's a speech-language pathologist. I'm a OBGYN. I just finished my training in Pennsylvania, about an hour and a half west of Philadelphia. And I had the privilege of being able to go and work with my friends that you see on the screen. My friend that I did ministry with in medical school at Loma Linda is Sarah Belinsky, and she's one of the main doctors at this hospital in very rural Africa in Chad. It's in the central part of Africa. And there was a rainy season and a dry season, and we were there in the rainy season. So there they are with her husband, Gabrielle, and their dog. One of the reasons I had a big burden to go and help them was because I had gone through my training, so I was able to do surgery, and I felt like I had more of a tangible skill to be able to help in the mission field, but especially because she was expecting, and she's pregnant, and this was a period of time where there was a period of time where she would be without any other doctor in the hospital. And I thought, well, if something happened to her, she was far enough along in the pregnancy where you could do something to help the baby. She actually came back this week to have the baby in the U.S. And so I wanted to be there to help her if she needed help. She actually did get malaria for the first time during pregnancy when we were there, and that can put you into preterm labor. We did some hydrotherapy on her. We prayed, and she took some medicine for malaria, and the Lord blessed, and she recovered in a day and did not go into premature labor.
Only a fever for one day. Yeah.
Only a fever for one day, so the Lord blessed.
And her husband is Gabriel. He is from France, and they met when she was studying French at Cologne, the Adventist University in France. He had finished his theology degree from there, and he's originally from Brazil. And so he speaks like Portuguese, Spanish, French, English, like all the people outside the U.S. know more than one language, right? So, Chad, Africa, this is probably our most beautiful picture of it. It was very beautiful when we went there. It was the rainy season, and so everything was green. Unfortunately, all the livestock and animals was still very skinny because most of the year it is very, very dry. And we were able to go, like Debbie said, it's in the central part of Africa. It borders Cameroon, Nigeria, and I think South Sudan to the north. It is very, very poor country in Africa. But you can see the thatched huts that they make, and then they make everything out of brick, which you think in the United States here, brick being very strong and long-lasting. But the brick that they use in Chad must not have the binder in it of lime or whatever they don't have there. So their brick can actually fall down in the rain sometimes. And when it rains in the rainy season, it pours. Yes. This is a picture from the mission compound at Barry Adventist Hospital, which is a very remote part of Africa. From the capital city of N'Djamena, we traveled about 8 to 10 hours in a bus. They were coach buses, very nice buses, but on very not nice roads. It was very, very lots of puddles in the rainy season, and lots of potholes, and so it was maybe not an 8-hour trip if you would go in the States here, because we were going much slower than you typically would. And then for the last 2 hours from the bus station to the hospital, we took a motorcycle taxi, which was a very new experience. Partly because the Land Rover that is at the Adventist hospital wouldn't make it to the bus station in the rainy season because of all the puddles and everything that, so yeah, that's a little bit about where it is.
The view from the top that you see here is from a water tower that climbed. We actually had clean running water, which was a blessing. We weren't sure if we would have that. But we had heard that sometimes there was internet up at the top of this. Water tower is about 40 feet tall, maybe. So we did climb a couple times trying to see because I needed to do something to help a friend back in the States. But we never really got internet. It was different. You know, we forget how often we do things with internet here.
So this is one of the motorcycles that we took to Sabbath Church out, where we'll be talking a little bit about evangelistic series that we helped with, and this was on the way to that. When we were taking the 2.5-hour motorcycle taxi ride, we only had one passenger per motorcycle, so it was a little more comfortable.
The fan you see here is pretty important because there's no air conditioning or fans, you know, when you have meetings in church or outside, and it's very hot there. The locals like to carry things on their heads, so I was actually sick for a week with a fever. They weren't sure if I had malaria. I don't think I actually did. But I was very thankful by Sabbath when it came around that week that I felt well enough to go to church, and then I realized when I was able to carry something on my head without hands that I was feeling well again. So we were very happy here. This is me preparing for surgery. We've scrubbed, which is wash our hands before surgery very carefully. You can see if you look carefully that the sink drains into a pipe and the water drips down into a hole in the ground. So it's almost the closest thing I know how to describe it is like doing surgery if you were on a camping trip. It's very primitive and very difficult. There's not very many tools at all that you use. And for example, the scalpel, which is what you use to cut with, usually in the U.S. it has a sharp part that you cut with, and then it has a handle that you hold on to. But they didn't even have handles there. And so you just take the blade in your hand and kind of cut. So there's no gory pictures, I promise, but the Lord was merciful to me and answered many prayers and saved many lives. There wasn't actually as many surgeries as I thought there would be because the rain prevented many people from coming because the rivers would flood. But there was a mother's life who we were able to save, and it was a miracle.
The statistics for women in Chad is really sad.
It's very common that women and babies die. Almost every woman that I met had had one or multiple children that had been born full term, no problems, but had died either through the birthing process or as a child. It's very sad.
And in their culture, having children is very important for status or for just family, and so oftentimes they're putting their babies close together too, which isn't the healthiest for the mom or the baby.
Like
either.
2 months after you have a baby, having another one.
To be pregnant again, yeah.
This is a picture of the operating room. It's a little hard to appreciate quite how rustic it was. But the operating room table there is rusty. It has cushions that are broken on it. And the refrigerator you see on the far right is actually the blood bank for the hospital. They struggle with a lot of things, not too different than what we struggle with in the U.S. as far as integrity, maybe to a greater degree in some ways, because they had to have the doctor unlock the operating room to get the blood out when someone needed it in the hospital, because otherwise the nurses would steal it and sell it on the black market. So
in that culture, family is more important than honesty and integrity. And so even in the Adventist church there in Chad, there's definitely a need for good biblical teaching of doctrines and just about relationships with God and what family should really look like. And so we were very happy to be able to share some about that also be an example.
I had an opportunity to teach the nurses, the nurses in Chad almost function like doctors. They do things like deliveries of babies just by themselves, even babies that are breech, which means the baby's butt is down instead of the head. They'll do those by themselves, which is kind of unheard of even as an OBGYN. I don't often do that in the U.S., only in certain situations like twins. So it was a real privilege to be able to teach the nursing students, because I felt like that was a way, the education was a really important way for us to give back to the community. There's a number of issues that, with the nursing there, like people just not showing up for work and there being no nurses for like 30 patients. Or other issues like just making up vital signs. 120/80 sounds like a good number, but never really taking it, especially when the patient's in the hospital for a blood pressure problem. So there's a number of different issues, and we tried to talk about trying to address these things.
All of this being translated into French, because unfortunately neither of us know French. But our good friend Sarah, who's the mission doctor there, knew French well, and her husband, as well as this is Dr. Stacy, who is actually in Debbie's brother's classmate at Loma Linda Medical School. But she was only there the first week we were there. This is me making some frames for the hospital. You can see in the next picture the finished product. There's a printing press, the only one in that whole region of Africa that some missionaries have, called Desert Tree Ministry. And they also print the Sabbath School quarterlies for that whole region, not just that country. And they were wanting to make beautiful Bible verses and pictures for the hospital to encourage people there and to use as Bible studies as well. And it was like they had a chop saw that they sawed. Gabriel, Sarah's husband, sawed the pieces of wood, and then he used a wood burner to make different designs. And it was really a neat artistic project.
In Chad, in the hospital, there's no decorations on the walls. It's concrete walls and concrete floors.
So they were making 70 of these frames. So a big project for me before we started the evangelistic series was just making those frames the first couple of weeks.
This is the church we went to the first week. It's a little hard to see, but you can see that there's a dirt floor and some benches. If you had too many people sitting on the benches would break in the middle, so you had to kind of distribute your weight. And you can't see quite in the front, but there's a couple pigeons that their wings are tied, and there's a pile of millet. I guess that's the way people bring their offerings to church over there. They talked that Sabbath about Sabbath as part of the sermon. It's pretty interesting. The culture doesn't have a lot of teachings on doctrine even within the church, and it's a quite common practice that they discussed at church in the sermon, where the women often have to stay home and can't come to church because they have to make a fancy meal for the husband, because it's a very male-dominant culture. And so they talked about how God would have the men bring their wives to church and not just have them work at home on Sabbath. And they also have other issues like the Sabbath market, where everyone goes to the market on Sabbath. They were talking about how God desires the church members to keep the Sabbath.
Mm-hmm. And so that was a main focus on the evangelistic meetings, too, that we had. This is the outside of the church that was right by the mission compound, and Barry Adventist Hospital. It was a little bit nicer. It had a cement floor in it. And you can see a little Pathfinder logo there at the front, too. They had a Pathfinder club. Now, this is the evangelistic meetings that we were a part of the last 10 days we were there. We were there in Chad for a month. There's a mission family, a pastor that, I think he went through Weimar College, and then he's been a missionary in Congo for many years, and then it became too dangerous for his family there in Congo, and so he's recently moved to Chad with the Dietrichs, who are the Desert Tree Ministry and the printing press there. And so he was wanting to do evangelistic series there in a section of the town that didn't have an Adventist church. And so we had expressed to our friend Sarah that we would be happy to help with evangelism or health talks or anything that we could while there. And it just so happened that we were able to share with the evangelistic series. And I wasn't expecting to do the preaching. That's not my talent, I don't think. But God pushes us outside of our comfort zones, and I humbly agreed to be the presenter for the evangelistic series for the first 10 nights, the last part we were there. And God really blessed, and this is what Debbie doing the health talk. This is at the place where they're planning and are planting a church. the same ground. And here's Debbie doing a health talk.
This is me doing a health talk before the meeting started, before he would preach. He'd preach pretty much in the dark because that was the only way you could project onto this white board that we used as the projector. It was a blessing because it was rainy season and God held back the rain all but one night where we had to cancel the meeting because it was just benches that they carried on their heads from the church, 20-minute walk to the meeting site. You can see me teaching about nutrition here. We talked about another number of different issues like self-control, which is also an issue in Chad because sometimes the men will earn $1 a day, but they'll go and spend most of it on alcohol and then give the rest to the mistress and the children starve. So talked about the fruit of the Spirit is self-control, and God can help you to put your family first and what God would have you, which in many ways self-control is something we struggle with also in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. So we definitely saw the difference between needs and wants when we were in Chad, and we're very thankful to be able to have the opportunity to do ministry together while we're still dating and stay with the missionaries and really encourage missionaries that are there for the long term, you know. I think that's when a mission trip is truly practical and is when you can support someone who's there with the people and dedicated to that. And so I just got an email from Pastor Keith Mosier, the pastor there, and our time is almost up, but he finished the evangelistic meetings, and the day after we left, he talked about the change of the Sabbath. And he says here that he had over 90 people commit or recommit to keep the Sabbath holy, and that many were Adventists, but over 30 visitors were also among that group. So I'm just praising God for that. When I was, one of the appeals that I gave, there were 2 people that committed for baptism. But he said with the meetings finished and the other appeals he did, he expect to baptize between 10 and 20 people, and they're doing a baptism in October. And so they're currently in the process of building a church right here where we did the evangelistic series, in a nice location at the edge of town where there isn't a church Adventist church nearby. And the land was, it looks like they have about $1,700 that they're needing for that, as well as the roofing sheets, which is about $400. They already had a Maranatha one-day church building that was there that they're constructing. And here's another picture of it. During the last Sabbath we were there in Chad, we had Sabbath church service at the future church site, which was really special.
They put up tarps, as you can see here, to protect from the sun, but there was just benches outside.
So the missionaries, Jonathan Dietrich and his family, who went through Southern, and then Pastor Keith Mosier, their ministry through OCI, a self-supporting ministry that they're also closely working with the Adventist Church there in Chad, is deserttreeministry.org if you're interested in learning more.
And if you want to donate to help them be able to build a church, remember they only earn about $1 a day, so it's $1,700 is a lot more for them than it is for us. I know that we contributed some money, and if you guys would like to help them so that they can build a church at this site, you can go to the deserttreeministry.org, or you can also donate during the offering.
I was told that you could make your donation out to, if you're writing a check, to the local church here, and then write Desert Tree Ministry, and or just somehow note that in the tithe envelope. So
in the memo on the check right there.
So she mentioned about what's next.
So what's next after Chad? In about 5 weeks, we'll be going to Guam to be missionaries long-term there in the Adventist clinic there. There's an opening for OBGYN, and it's a clinic that focuses on having enough time to spend with people so that you can actually help them have a deeper walk with the Lord and learn the health principles that God's given us as a people. So we're really excited about that.
Thank you so much. Happy Sabbath.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing. I don't want to forego our prayer time. Let me get this turned off. So here we go. At this time, if we could pair up 2 or 3 together and pray, we need to remember Desert Tree Ministry and just our ministry here too, wherever we are we have a witness, don't we? All of us have a witness. So if you would like to pray with someone, which I hope you would, if we would just pray for a few minutes together, ask for the Holy Spirit to be with us as we come together in worship.